So I moved to Australia in 2010. I moved here from Europe, by which I mean the UK and Belgium. I had been working for IBM in a global team. So that gave me the confidence to feel like I could come here and I could move into the job that I wanted to pick with an Australian company. However, when I was in my meetings, in my first meetings where people knew, I would be racked with this anxiety, and I would sit there in the meeting thinking, please don't ask me a question, please don't ask me a question. And the reason why I was thinking that was because if they had asked me a question, I wouldn't have had an answer for them, because the only thought in my head was, please don't ask me a question. And I couldn't hear anything else. And such was my crippling anxiety. And I'd come from a global team in IBM, as I say. When I was talking about this last night with Adam Stevenson, he said, but Michelle, you don't feel like that now, right? You don't feel like that now. And I said, everyone does. Everyone feels it at some point. At some point, there is a voice in everyone's head that holds them back from opportunity, that says, you are not asking the smart questions. You shouldn't speak up. You shouldn't take that opportunity. Are there any introverts in the room? Now, you see, that's a bit of a trick question, because I know if you were really an introvert, you wouldn't be putting your hand up.
I just had some quiet time.
Well, I'm assuming then behind that first level of introverts, there is a second level of introverts who are hiding behind the people with their hands up. Any extroverts? Oh, look at you in the minority amongst us. So, yeah, there's nothing for you guys. You two can go, I should say. Let me tell you another story. So this is one that I tell often, and it's one that happened to me about, I don't know how many years ago now, because I'm getting really old. I was quite new to the country, and I was newly elected to a position on a organization. And so I was going to a big event, a big networking event. 400 or 500 people would be there. And I knew that I needed to work the room. I needed to speak to people. I needed to make an impact in those first 20 seconds when I introduced myself. But I found the whole idea horrifying. So I came up with a plan. I thought, what I will do is I will rock up to the event about half an hour early. I will stand on the edge of the room and I will watch people as they come in. And I will accustom myself to the idea that these people are normal people. They are fine. There's nothing to be scared of here. As I was doing that, another idea occurred to me, and I thought, what I could do is, in fact, not walk up to a stranger and try and impress them, but I could look for someone that I know, speaking to someone that I don't know, and then walk up to the pair of them. And then the person that I knew would introduce me to the other person, so I would have a soft introduction. So with this genius plan in mind, I saw someone I knew talking to someone I didn't know, and I walked up to them, and I said, hey, Pat. And he said, hey, Michelle, do you know blah, blah? He is the CEO of the Department of Big Government Things. I immediately started panicking. I could feel the blush rising to my cheeks because I was unprepared for this scenario. I did not have my elevator pitch ready to go. I thought it was just going to be okay and a little chit chat to get me warmed up. And now, inadvertently, I was standing in front of the most important person in the room, and I couldn't remember my name. So I'm blushing, I'm feeling that buzzing in my head, I'm starting to feel a bit faint. I'm wondering if it would be weirder if I did faint or if I made a run for the toilets. My hands are starting to feel sweaty. And as all of this is going through my mind, the guy reaches forward, takes my hand and shakes it and says, "You're Michelle Sandford. I follow you on LinkedIn. I love your articles." I was immediately so relieved. I didn't need to tell this guy who I was in 20 seconds or less. I didn't need to prove to him that I had any valid ideas. He already knew who I was and he already liked my thoughts. And I thought, this is amazing. With the power of a tool, a free tool that we have available to us, I could shortcut my time to MVP, by which I mean minimum visible person. So, I usually tell that story at the start of another session I have that's called Well-Connected Small Steps You Can Take to Increase Your Impact. You can find that on my YouTube channel, and it talks about how you can use LinkedIn in order to, what have I got? 3 things. Establish credibility from a distance, influence by volume, and access all areas from the factory floor all the way up to the boardroom, and use those skills to position yourself for the career that you want. I'm not going to talk about LinkedIn today. I'm going to talk about another tool. I am going to talk about GitHub CoPilot, my trusted AI pal. Because I am an introvert, I have more problems than just being able to work a room. I do not like to use my phone for phone calls. Is anyone else with me on that? Just a few of you. Some of you are using your phone for phone calls. No, it's for DMs, for text messages, it's for social media, and it's for taking photographs. When my phone rings, I will stare at it and hope that it stops really quickly, all the time saying to myself, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, which I do not. Then I look at it hoping maybe it has not gone to voicemail, because if it's gone to voicemail, I will have to listen to that message and they will say, Michelle, it's urgent, can you call me back? Not what I am calling about, but just it's urgent, call me back. This doesn't make it any less anxious in my brain. Why can't they just text me? Why can't they just text me and tell me what they want? So I have a few issues, you can see. Third one, I hate asking for help. I hate asking for help because I don't want people to think that I'm stupid. I don't want people to think I have foolish questions in my brain, of which I don't. I don't have foolish questions in my brain, not because I am super smart, just because there's nothing going on in my brain. It's full of panic all the time. So, yeah, is it just me, or are other people feeling that? Some of you, yeah? Okay, good. These pictures, by the way, are all generated by Bing CoPilot. So some of you are using ChatGPT, some of you are using DALL-E, some of you are using, I don't know, Stable Diffusion, other things like that. I use Bing CoPilot because you can both chat to it and you can ask it to generate images, and it's all free. So you can do all of those things in the same. I mostly got some great images doing what I wanted it to do. But I do have an example later that little Gia is in that it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it's slightly hilarious. Anyway, how many of you here have suffered from imposter syndrome? How many of you have not suffered from it? Interesting. So half of you have suffered from it. The other half have not suffered from it. But it could be. Well, does anyone not know what it is? Also interesting. I'm going to assume, though, because one of the things would be, if you have imposter syndrome, you might be embarrassed to put your hand up and ask what imposter syndrome is because you don't want to look stupid. That's kind of part of the whole problem that we're in here. So I'm going to explain what it is for those of you that aren't sure. It is a psychological phenomenon. I cannot say that word. No one can say it. Which, can you say that, Gia? Phenomenon. Oh, Gia can't say so many words, but that's the word she can say. Yeah, where people doubt their skills, talents, or accomplishments and have a persistent fear of being exposed as frauds. Anyone can suffer from it. So whether you're a student or whether you're a CEO, you can absolutely suffer from it. You might experience anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and frustration. I'm going to tell you about a lot of those things during the session. Also, you might attribute your success to luck or to timing or to deceiving others, tricking others. I'm going to talk about how I hate that as well. Now, as I get older, I give a lot less of a shit about what other people think. I should apologize in that many of you may have been expecting a completely PG session because I rarely swear. However, I may swear once or twice. I hope that you're okay with it. If you're not, reprimand me afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 5 types of imposter syndrome today, and I'm going to talk about how we can solve each of those types with the help of GitHub CoPilot. Obviously, it's not everything, but I'll round that up at the end. So, the first type that we have is the expert. This type involves feeling like a fraud because you don't know everything there is to know about a subject or topic. How many of you ever felt that? How many of you would like to speak at a conference but feel that you cannot be the speaker because you don't know everything that there is to know? Right. You would be surprised. I don't think if you ask any of the speakers, they would say that they know everything that there is to know about the topic. True. Or that it's possible to know everything that there is to know about a topic. Even Rowdy, who is rowdy, does not know everything. I'm going to talk about Lars Klint. Lars Klint has taught me the most about overcoming this kind of imposter syndrome. I saw Lars do a session at another conference, and he was talking about Azure Cognitive Services, specifically ones that were very new out. And Lars has this very interactive style, and he loves people to ask questions as you go along. So he encouraged them all to ask questions throughout the talk, and he couldn't answer any of them. They were asking him questions. He didn't know the answer. Each time he would write down the question and he would say, I don't know that today, but I'm going to come back to you with the answer to that. And I was just watching with my mouth open because he was completely unfazed by that. And he carried on. His presentation was really engaging. He taught them lots and lots of interesting things, but he couldn't answer most of the questions. And at the end, I went to him and I said, Lars, how can you do that? Are you okay? And he said, oh yeah, that was fine. That was great. All of these questions that I've written down will form the content for my next talk after I found out the answers. And it was just such an astounding moment for me when I thought, wow, that isn't failure. That is a growth mindset. That is a guy who is continuously learning and acknowledges it. That is a guy who takes everything from his experience and builds onto it and is better tomorrow than he is today. That's what I want to be, rather than someone living in fear. So that's one methodology for overcoming this kind of imposter syndrome. Develop a growth mindset and embrace your learning opportunities. Now, I do apologize for my code window being so tiny because the projector is not working well today. However, I'm going to explain to you what is happening here. So this is GitHub CoPilot in a code space. I use code spaces because I very often will update my repositories with all the dependencies and cause the code not to work. I make a tremendous mess all the time. I am too lazy to use virtual environments on my machine. And so it's always going horribly wrong. However, codebases, every time you open it, it's going to open with all the things and all the requirements and all the dependencies that you need in order to run your environment in its perfect pure state. So I always use that now, except if I'm on an aeroplane with no Wi-Fi, because bizarrely, the only place you cannot access the cloud is when you are in the clouds. What I have here is a very simple rock, paper, scissors game. There must be hundreds of ways to code a rock, paper, scissors game. So it's a really good way to demo. What I have done so this is my CoPilot chat, and I ask it, let me see what So, when I first got CoPilot, the first thing that I would do is I would ask it to give me 10 different ways to do a particular function. And then I would look at those 10 different ways to do the function, and I would pick the one that was most like the code I would have written. So therefore, we're still writing the code I would have written, we're just doing it a lot faster. After the CoPilot chat integration came out, I changed from that, because when I was looking at those 10 samples of code, I was thinking some of these things look like better code than what I would have written. My code is quite verbose because, as you can see, every thought in my brain has to come out in an individual line. That makes for quite lengthy code. And I was looking at these other samples of code and thinking, those look better, those look cleaner, those look more efficient, those look like they are going to be faster. But I don't understand how that works. I don't understand that thinking. And I never would have thought to code it in that way. Once I had CoPilot chat, I would highlight that and say, explain this code to me. And it would explain the code to me. And I would understand the code. And then I would think, I can use that code. That is pretty cool. But because I know the developer I am today is not going to be the same developer I am in 5 years' time, I also ask it to verbosely comment my code for me. So I do not forget how the code that I am putting in there today works and what I'm using it for and what its purpose is. Now I realize if I'm working in a code base with a bunch of other developers, they might mock me for that. That's one of my fears, part of the imposter syndrome. So I might, if I'm committing it to a work repository, ask it to more efficiently comment the code before we commit it to, so that the others don't mock me. They have never mocked me, but in my head, that's what the voice says. That voice is not your friend, by the way, if any of you thought it was. Not your friend. Okay, so explain it to me. So basically GitHub CoPilot is making me write better code. It's showing me different ways of coding, and it is helping me to understand what I need. I did in that sample, which you cannot see at all because it's too small, I did do a couple of other things. So I said, could you rewrite, is that code written in a functional style? Could you write it in a functional style? Could you write it in an object-oriented style? Let's say I'd written it all in Python and I discovered that everyone else was using Rust. Could you rewrite the whole thing in Rust? Yes. Yes. It can do all of those things. So if you realize you're using the wrong language, the wrong framework, the wrong architecture, all of those things, it can help you change it and it can explain it to you. It's teaching me. It's my first teacher. It's my first friend. So that's the first ways. Okay, on to the next one. The perfectionist. So this type involves believing that you could have done better unless you were absolutely perfect. Anyone this type? A few? Layla, who was in this room before me, Layla is definitely this. She practices and she practices and she practices. She then gets her friends together and practices in front of them. She then does it in front of meetups, in front of smaller groups, in front of her company, and she's constantly iterating. The talk that she did before this one was the keynote at NDC London, and yet nevertheless, she was practicing this week before doing it because she wants it to be so perfect. I admire that level of dedication, but also, who has time for that these days? Yes. So how do you debug that thinking? Well, she does what she does. She seeks feedback from others and support. So when we hear her saying crazy things like, I was just lucky to be picked, we, her friends, can say to her, you weren't lucky, you worked really hard, you are really good at what you do, that is why you were picked. And hopefully she hears it and doesn't spend too much time overthinking things. Okay, so in this code, which you also cannot see, what I say to it, I've highlighted the whole lot and I've said, well, I've highlighted this one function and I've said, is there a better way to do the main function on this game? And it says there is a more efficient way to implement this. What I think is interesting is I said, is there a better way to code this game? What does better mean? What is a better way in terms of coding? Well, it answered there is a more efficient way to do it, and it's given me a different way of doing it, which I initially thought, you know what, I should test the game before I replace the code just to make sure it's working before I start messing with it. And that worked okay. What I have in the game is it's rock, paper, scissors, and you will win the game if the first person out of two. So you or the computer gets 2 games won, then you have won the game. It will show you, the score for the computer for each round, and it will tell you when you win the game. So if you don't give it a lot of information, you just say create a rock, paper, scissors game, you don't necessarily get all of those conditions. When people are talking about, writing code and will CoPilot just write the whole thing for you? Absolutely will. Will it be the best thing that you could have written? Will it be exactly as you wanted it? Not if you say it like that. Gia has a little talk tomorrow about prompt engineering, and so check that out. So what you put in your things is going to make it better. So if you're a very good architect, if you have really thought through your code, you can get it to do a better game. More efficient, it has done there. And then I asked it, have you got any other suggestions for how I could make this better? So, I don't have to implement all of those things, but I can look at the suggestions that it puts in, and then I can implement the ones that I think make sense. If anyone was in Simon Waite's session yesterday, it gave him a lot of suggestions, none of which were useful and made any sense. Don't just accept stuff blindly. When I first had it, I was coding with my dog Snickers. She had her little paw on the tab key. You can absolutely code by just pressing tab and enter and accepting everything. But the program that it writes will be super long because it's thinking about everything function by function. It hasn't got an overall architecture in mind. So, the better developer you are, the more CoPilot can help you. But if you are a beginner, it will also help you learn as long as you're not trying to be lazy. So it will help you surface ideas that you might not have considered on your own, and you can judge whether you want to implement them. Ooh, that's weird. It doesn't like me to look at my notes. It prefers if I speak to you here. Okay, so how this helps your imposter syndrome is if you are the kind of person that really wants to make sure everything is perfect before you show it to your colleagues, this is going to help you validate a lot of your ideas, validate a lot of your code. It's going to help you have that grounding to discuss it. So when you give it to a more senior dev or a teammate, and they say, that's not very efficient, you can say, I beg to differ. It wasn't efficient when I started, but I've discussed it with GitHub CoPilot, and it's very efficient now because of these things. And then he or she can argue with you about that for a while, but you understand it better because you've already had that initial discussion with Copilot. And it's quicker than going to Stack Overflow or to Google or Reddit or whatever you need. I know that one of the memes on the internet is where senior devs have gotten tired of answering all the questions for their junior dev and have said, go and research it yourself. And 3 weeks later, they come back with the function. That's not the goal. The goal is to help them be able to do their research, discuss it with someone, validate it, bounce it off this Copilot, and then they can come to you later that day to work through it. Less wasted time. Okay, super person. Anyone have families? Yes. So the super person, this type involves feeling like a fraud because you're trying to excel in multiple roles, such as work, family, and personal life. So maybe you feel like you're not showing up for your kids, for your wife or husband, dogs in my case, or you're not giving it as much at work because you are placing some priorities on your personal life. But no matter what, you feel like you are failing in some way. You are not giving enough to all the people that are relying on you. Is anyone on that one? A few? Another thing. So not just your families and all of that, in your workplace, does anyone remember when developers just did code? Yeah, when you were just doing the tiny job of building the products, and you didn't have to do security, and you didn't have to do testing. It was all just code. And in fact, I remember putting the keys in my code. Does anyone remember that? Yes, everyone puts keys in the code when they first start. But then we had this marvelous DevOps revolution where they asked us all to shift left, which is great for the software development process. It means that everything is addressed earlier and that you will have better software in the long run because you are starting your testing in the code when you are writing it. You are ensuring that your security is built into it. But how do you know all of that? When you're a junior dev, for example, maybe you don't know that much about security. Maybe you don't know that much about testing. Well, GitHub CoPilot is going to help you. These are the ways that you can, there's a lot of ways that you can try and recognize and address your imposter syndrome when you are this type. So you have to recognize the idea that you cannot do everything. You have to seek support from your network, the people around you, your team, your family. You do have to celebrate your achievements and acknowledge your strengths. So when you are doing great things, say, that was great. I did do that. I did turn up in time for my kids' sports day or whatever. And seek professional help. I don't just mean like a counselor or a therapist, but I also mean like childcare, cleaner, whatever else you can have to like help you, because it's impossible in this world to do it all. What GitHub does is, so not just the Copilot, in GitHub, there is a whole bunch of code security features built in, and you can just turn them all on. Some of them are enabled by default when you're using a public repository or your enterprise version, and some of them are things that you can turn on. What we have, Dependabots. So Dependabot will notify you of any dependencies in your repository, if there are any known security vulnerabilities, and it will also create the pull requests for you, which is a huge time saver. It will do secret scanning to look for any of those keys you might accidentally have put in there and stop you committing those. And it you can then put those in GitHub's encrypted secrets. Advanced security, some of that is for free and some of that is in an enterprise version. I think there's already really a lot there for free. So don't feel like this is unfair, I need to pay for stuff to keep me safe. No. Most of it you don't need to pay for to keep you safe. Turn them all on, let it do as much automation and as much warning, as much monitoring as you can. And if you are lucky enough to have an enterprise version as part of your company, then turn all of those on too. I'm also having it do some tests in here. I don't know how to write a test file. I wasn't sure of things like even do I write the tests within the main file or do I have a separate file that's the test file? So I asked it to help me write some unit tests. And then after it had given me the code for that, I said, do I need to put that in a separate file or do I put it within the main file? And it told me you'd usually do this and this is what it would be called. Then I said, are those tests as comprehensive as they could be? And it said, no, there are a bunch more tests that you could run if you want to. And it told me what those tests were and what they would be testing for. When Simon was doing his session yesterday, he said, you wouldn't want to build for your initial test file this massively comprehensive tests every scenario thing because it's just going to slow everything down. In my mind, I had thought, surely you would. Surely you want to test for everything and then give your perfect code to the next people along the line. But yeah, apparently you don't. And you can discuss that with it and you can look and form that kind of medium way. What do they want? What do you want? What is the best thing? But CoPilot taught me all about that, and that was really useful. The natural genius. So this type involves feeling like a fraud because you don't believe you are naturally intelligent or competent. Is anyone this? Really? This one is incomprehensible to me. In fact, I'm a B+. I feel it, I know it. I am, even when I have worked as hard as I could possibly work in my life, I have only received A's maybe twice. The rest of the time I work really hard, I'm a B+. I'm not ashamed of that. I feel like I have my technical skills and I have a lot of other skills that all mixed together mean that, I'm a nice, slightly above average person. Natural genius, I don't... I'll tell you why I'm spluttering over that one. So I most often see this when I'm at She Codes. She Codes is this wonderful program where you teach women to code. And these are grown-up women who would like to change careers from something else into computing careers. They will come for a one-day workshop and they will start to try learning to code. And after a few hours, they might say, this is really hard. I don't think I'm any good at this. I don't think I should do it. And you also find a lot of girls in schools told by their parents or by their school teachers that girls are not good at coding. And so because they are told they are not good at coding, they think they cannot be good at coding. And therefore they do not try. They just say, okay, excuse me while I leave the room and go to where girls are good at things. If you have daughters, do not let them hear this messaging. Do not. Reassure them. Allow people the opportunity to try stuff before they give up. What I always remind them is that no one ever walked out of the birth canal. It took us more than 2 years to learn how to walk properly, to talk properly, even to feed ourselves. If we gave up on day one, where would we be now? And these are things that we do instinctively now, or we think so. If you find something hard, do it until you can't do it anymore, and then stop. And then pick it up again tomorrow and do a little bit more, and do a little bit more the day after, and a little bit more the day after. You will improve on your skills each day, becoming better at what you do. And before you know it, that is the thing that other people consider you to be expert in. You probably won't, but other people do. I think that this one, to be this kind of person, I think is kind of lazy. Do you know what I mean? Like you're good at it, or you're not even going to try. That is crazy to me. That is not worthy of admiration. The other thing is it's also insulting. When people say, oh, that guy, he is so good at it, he has such a natural talent for it. I just think it's dismissive of all of the work that guy has put in his whole life, all of the learning, all of the training, all of the day after day doing stuff. It's just dismissed as, yeah, he was born with it. So, yeah, that type. Don't yearn for this. The things that we can do to overcome this type, recognize and challenge your negative thoughts, celebrate your achievements and acknowledge your strengths, develop that growth mindset. That's really the key one in my view, and seek professional help if needed. A lot of people think, counselling or therapist is not for me. I think we all need it in this day and age. 2023 was hard. 2024 is still pretty hard. If you have access to it, seek it. Okay, in this one, I said to it, could you explain this code to me as if I am a new programmer who has never seen Python before? So this is really good because it's not just going to explain the code to me, but I can also ask it questions like, do I need to install Python, and how do I install Python? After it told me how to install it, I did clarify, and this is perhaps not a question you would know. But I said, do I need to install Python if I'm using it in CodeSpaces? And it immediately said no. No, you don't, because your CodeSpaces opens up with all your dependencies and everything that you need in there in only a few minutes. Another big time saver about CodeSpaces. Oh, also 60 hours of CodeSpaces free per month for everyone, even on a free license. So no reason not to use it except if you're in the clouds. So yeah, I think this is really good because in the past where I'd learn a new language, I would go to the docs for that language. I would try to install it. It would have different installs for whether I'm on an Apple, whether I'm on a Windows machine, whether I'm using Linux, or, whatever. And often there's like a bunch of different options, and it's going to take me a while just to figure out and navigate what I want to do. That's wasteful. I can just ask it there, and I can just click on the links within it, in fact, and go straight to it and do the things. It's saving me a lot of time learning stuff because I can ask directly in the context of the code that I am in. So it's the other advantage. You don't have to switch context, and you also, because you're never switching out of that window, you aren't distracted by your emails or by your LinkedIn. Okay, this one is definitely the one that I feel like the most. So this type involves feeling like a fraud if you had to ask for help to reach a certain level or status. I hate it. I hate asking for help. I feel super embarrassed, and I'm afraid that it's going to be a really easy thing that someone else will look at it and say, why are you asking this basic question? I do have some people who I ask for help occasionally after panicking for a while. And those people, I don't know if they realize what a huge compliment it is that I dare to ask them for help, because, I have all of this inside me that's holding me back and stopping me reaching out. Yeah, but it doesn't mean you are lesser if you ask for help. It's totally fine. I am going to talk about Gia on this slide. So Gia is actually one of the people that has helped me realize how crazy that was. Gia, I hired as my grad hire many years ago. She's all grown up now and like a data and AI architect in her own right, but she was just a baby grad back then. And I asked her one day to help me troubleshoot my code. And she came and said, well, I will, but why are you asking me and not asking Graham? So Graham Foster is like a nice senior dev. You might know him. He's incredibly awesome. And I said, well, you see, Gia, I asked Graham to help me yesterday. And the problem with Graham is he's the same age as me. He learned how to code in the same era that I learned to code. He learned from the same books. He learned the same troubleshooting techniques. So we spent half an hour going through my code, doing exactly the same steps that I had already done 10 times that morning, and we couldn't see it. Gia, little baby Gia, immediately saw that I had a capital letter in the file path. This is a common mistake I make. It wasn't then, but now I realize this is a flaw in my thinking, that I can never see the capital letter in my file path. She picked it out like right away. I immediately dismissed that and said, no, it's not that. That's so stupid. I wouldn't have. And then we changed it and it worked. Marvelous. Do you know what? I wasn't even supposed to tell that story in this one. I was going to tell the other story where Gia, any room that she is in, she is the first person to put her hand up and ask questions. And she will ask like 1 million questions. I'm sitting there thinking, don't ask that question, it's stupid. Don't ask that question, it's stupid, to myself in my head. But Gia does not have that voice holding her back from asking questions. She asks 1 million questions, and instead of making her look stupid, it makes her look smart. When I hear her asking those questions, I think, wow, I wish I'd thought of those questions. And I think, wow, that is such a different way to look at this problem than how I was viewing it. It opens up my mind to new ways of seeing it and to finding a solution much faster. Not because she had more expertise than Graham, but because she looked at the world, she looked at problems in a different way. So even if you lack experience, you can bring so much to the table. So this whole imposter syndrome thing, it's not about being the best, it's not about being the oldest, the most experienced, it's, none of those things. It's about owning your own voice, knowing who you are and not being afraid to speak up. Silence that other voice in the back of your head. Ooh, goodness. Oh, also, I do have a little story about Aaron as well. He did a nice generative AI talk yesterday. I messaged him at the weekend because I was teaching a bunch of students in the US how to, I promised them I would show them how to deploy a website, like create their own portfolio website, throw it up in Azure Static Web Apps or in GitHub Pages, and then you would have a portfolio site and you could do it in 20 minutes. You can, of course, do it in 20 minutes, but when you're trying to teach it in 20 minutes, that's a bit more challenging. So, of course, I had skipped steps and I couldn't see them. I asked Aaron, what am I doing? And he said, you don't have a GitHub Pages branch. Now, initially, my mind was very much, I need to create a GitHub Pages branch. But of course, that is not the answer. That is the hint. The correct answer is you need to run the deploy command, which will create the GitHub Pages branch, and it will actually deploy your website. And I had skipped that step because I was in too much of a hurry. It still didn't work after that, but that was because, capital in the file path. So yeah, recognize and challenge your negative thoughts, seek the feedback and support of others, seek professional help if needed. I've actually done it in VS Code rather than in Codespaces just because, watch this, even if you can't read it, I literally ask it to generate a REST API using MongoDB and Express Node. Look at this. And it just does like magic in front of you. Flash, 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 flash. There's the code. That's flashier than how it looks in CodeSpaces. So I had to record that one. But of course, I don't understand any of that because I haven't written it. So then I would ask it, explain this code to me like I'm 5. Verbosely comment the code for me so that I can look through step by step and make sure I really understand it. And then I asked it as well, is there something else I need to do to this code? Like, do I need to put in some keys, some server-side stuff? Like, what do I need to do with this boilerplate that you have generated for me? And it explains all of that to me, and so I can understand what I'm doing before I get to it, which is just glorious. I do get decision makers coming to us and saying, isn't it cheating? Won't our junior devs be cheating if they use GitHub CoPilot? If your senior devs and your junior devs are lazy, then absolutely everyone can use it to cheat. Will your code be good? No. You will have code that works. Will it be good code? Unlikely, because you need to give it good prompts, you need to give it good input, you need to be specific about how you want to design the whole thing if you want it to work out well. You could absolutely just be committing all of this stuff in, and it would be long and it would be cumbersome. But if you use it well, use it properly, it will speed up your good code. It will take you to do what you were going to do anyway, but quicker, without coming out, without context switching, without losing yourself in other tools. It will keep you in flow, answer your questions, and enable you to get shit done. That's Gia and Graham. So I asked it to create for me an image of a senior dev that was sort of 40, 45 and a early in career Asian dev. It was unable to create a developer for me that wasn't startlingly handsome. And I kept saying, he is skinnier than that. He's not as well built. Can you make it look like maybe he's been coding all night? And his eyes just got more and more piercing. Gia got younger and younger. So it just wanted her to always be a 12-year-old girl child. Or as I tried to make her older and older, it went from maybe 15-year-old girl child to Asian grandmother. So there are definitely some biases within generative AI, but it's not terrible. This was where yes. Well, yes, perhaps that is reflecting reality, that all Asian people are, in fact, look like they're 15 until they look like they're 65. So that's what the AI thinks. So yes, this was where I was meant to tell you the story about the way Gia sees the world. I did just want to share. Because, this was what it really wanted to give me. I showed this to Graham, and he assured me that under his shirt, that is what he looks like. The 3 things that I learned from Gia and Graham is that diversity of thought comes from seeing things that others do not see. It wasn't because I was a bad coder that I couldn't fix my code, and it's never a mistake to look for help from different sources. I did ask it about responsible AI principles as well. I asked it how could I incorporate responsible AI principles into my code, and it said, we're not coding any AI, so what are you talking about? But it still was pretty into it. It told me what the responsible AI principles were, and actually that those would be pretty good in your life or in your code. It doesn't need AI. So it's like, fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusivity, transparency, accountability. All good things. Oh, and inclusiveness. I should say. And then then it did actually give me a bunch of different ways that I could incorporate that by testing, by error handling, by input validation, by security, by privacy, and by documentation. And then I asked it, could GitHub help me with any of those specifically, like the security part? And then it told me about all the depend bots and all of those things that I could turn on. So it's good to do good things with your code, to double check that as your final thing, and it will give you plenty of useful suggestions for turning those on. So, Copilot is allowing developers to focus. I look this way at my notes, it just doesn't want to see it. Copilot allowing developers to focus on impactful code and creating more meaningful challenges. Rather than typing out boilerplate code, you can instead focus on solving the bigger problems and collaborating with your team and even pursuing other hobbies outside of work. Imagine. So instead of breaking flow or focusing on the tedium, developers can rely on GitHub CoPilot to write unit tests, suggest code improvements, find the right Git commands, summarize code changes, explain the code, and more. So, I have been talking about imposter syndrome, and I have been talking about Copilot, but I am afraid, despite all my chatter, you cannot just talk to the tools and overcome your imposter syndrome just with tools. You actually do have to engage with people at some point, horrifying as the idea is. So LinkedIn will help you build brand, absolutely. GitHub CoPilot will help you learn, ask questions, and find other ways of doing things. But eventually you have to talk to other people. The people who form your friends, who are your community, who are your team, who are your network. They will help you silence the voice in your head that says you are not good enough. Turn to them, trust them. There is someone amongst them, and I think you will find that when you ask people for help, they will help you. So I have Gia, I have Aaron, I have George. These people help me, and they have never laughed at me, although I laugh at Gia all the time. So perhaps they are better people than I am, clearly. Yeah, I do want to say again, 2023 was a really tough year. I don't think that 2024 is getting better as yet. I do think that our corporate overlords think that AI is the answer and it will enable us to do more with less, which absolutely it is. But nevertheless, a lot of people will burn out. And that is not a good place that we're currently in as an industry. So I want to ask you to look out for each other, to look out for yourself, to be aware that this is an issue. Yeah. It's a sad thing when I ponder it. Don't be alone in this time. Even though I'm saying that I hate and despise all people, it's not true. I like the ones closest to me. I like the community that I engage with, and I know that we can help and support each other. These are my top tips to go away with, and all the things that I've talked about throughout this presentation. So I'll just stress those again. Seek to recognize and challenge your negative thoughts. That voice in your head is not your friend. It is absolutely not your friend. I don't know if you specifically recognize who it is that you hear when is it your mother or your father that says you're not good enough, boy, try harder, try again? Or is it just a generic voice in the back of your head that you don't recognize? Maybe it's your boss. But don't listen to them. Listen to the people around you. Get feedback and support from those people around you, your friends, your team, your colleagues, your family. Celebrate your achievements and acknowledge your strengths. LinkedIn is great for that. When you pass a new certification, when you finish a project, when you solve a code problem, I don't know, when you speak at a conference, when you do anything, post those things on LinkedIn to remind yourself of the great things that are happening in your life, that you have done things that are worthy this year. I also have a happiness jar empty glass jar, in it coloured Post-it notes, and every time something great happens, some achievement, maybe even just my boss says good job, I will write it on the Post-it note with the date. I will put it in the happiness jar, and on New Year's Eve, which is the most depressing day of the year, I will tip all the things out of the jar, and instead of thinking I haven't achieved anything this year, where has the year gone, I will be able to read through all of those notes and realise that in fact a lot of stuff went on this year that I'm very happy for. Develop a growth mindset, be like Lars, so embrace your learning opportunities, and remember that yes, when we work in tech, everything changes every day. They released 100 new features in Azure last night, probably, there is no way you can know absolutely everything there is to know in your field, in your topic, in technology. You have to be reading, learning, growing. I mean, you're all here at this conference, which is a great start, but yes, don't feel that you should know everything. No one can. And seek professional help if you have the opportunity. A lot of the corporate overlords do recognize people are burning out and so have turned on free access to an app or something for you. But if they do have a mental health and well-being plan that you can seek help, take advantage of that, because it's not something for other people. I think it's something for all of us in this day and age. I think we may as well use it and it will help us. I do have a few resources. There is a nice Learn path on Microsoft Learn if you want to know about CoPilot. It's real quick and it's got 2 separate modules, one for just free community and one for enterprise. The GitHub docs on CoPilot are also there. And I do have this book recommendation, The Imposter's Handbook, of which Scott Hanselman wrote the foreword. And there is a second edition of that book out. And if we are not already friends on the LinkedIn or on any other socials, please do feel free to connect to me. I would love it if we could remain best friends from this point onwards, because as you see, I have a lot of issues, and so I could do with more friends. Thanks for coming to my talk.